Well, for a return visit, I had my friend Nick Dessipris. And, the first time around was great, Nick. The second time around should prove to be even better because now we're going to find out. Now, this is the guy that has this wonderful film, Niko Newark, debuting. Well, let's talk about the dates before we begin this time, so people can hear where they can come to see this. The preview, anyway.
So the short film is screening in New York at the New York Short Film Festival. It's at Cinema Village on November 14th, 9 p.m. It's a Thursday night.
All right, you got that, folks. Show up, and you won't regret it. It's going to be fantastic. I'll be there. My wife Cynthia will be there, and that's the case. Cynthia's going to drive. She's going to drive the whole entire way. She's going to do the Uber. It's going to be my private Uber. Anyway, so Nick, I thought tonight, because of your permission, and we talked about it briefly beforehand, that we could delve into something, about the diner, the crux of the whole film, actually. It kind of revolves around the diner, or kind of sprung from the diner. I guess it did. That's the right way to put it, I guess. In Newark in the 60s, flipping burgers or making fries or whatever you were doing there at the ripe age of what?
I probably became a professional by the age of 8.
8-year-old professional I have with us. That's something. That's really something. Tell us about those early days and how it was. What you remember now, so many years later.
Well, the diner was like my amusement park, where I lived in West Orange in the suburbs. After the riots, we moved to West Orange in the suburbs, and that was not a very exciting or happy place for me. I always looked forward to going to the diner with my father to meet the interesting people at the diner, the real characters in life, as opposed to all those people in the suburbs that all look perfect with their white picket fences and their little children and dogs and all that kind of stuff. But it just didn't seem real to me. It just it seemed fake, and the people in the diner seemed real to me. To somebody else, they might have seemed like freaks, because you had prostitutes, like I said last time. You had gangsters, just people that just hung out and were just regular everyday cab drivers or bus drivers. But everybody, they were listening to music on the jukebox, and everybody was hanging out, and it was always fun to be there, even though my father was yelling at me most of the time.
Now, now you took flight because of the riots? We should emphasize that, because if you didn't see the previous video, there were these fabled riots around 1967. Am I right on that?
Yeah, the summer of July 1967.
And much were written about these riots. These riots were well known throughout the state, throughout the country, actually. It was a turning point in the civil rights movement in a certain sense. And Nick, my friend Nick here, was right in the middle.
Yeah, my dad's diner was right on Broad Street in Newark, which is the downtown, just a few doors away from City Hall, which they basically burned down too. They burned down the whole street except for my father's diner, because that was the neutral place where all the gangsters and cops and hookers and pimps and everybody hung out in. So that was off limits. So it was a front row seat.
Wow. That's it. That's a good way to put it, because that's exactly what it was. From what you've told me so far, we got on board for about an hour the last time. I learned some great things about Newark that I never knew. A Pattersonian, Patterson native, New Jersey.
Right.
Very, very similar, as we said. So reluctantly, I would assume that you went off to, did you, I know you have no consent when you're 8 years old. You do what your father says you have to do, but did you go willingly?
Well, when we moved, I was going on 5 years old. So, first we moved to Irvington from Newark, and then we moved from Irvington to West Orange. And yeah, I definitely didn't get asked my opinion. Um, I just did what my father told me, and I tried to navigate my way into the suburbs and that whole environment and school system, which was so different. I felt like an alien.
And your father was very rough on you in every sense of the word, right?
My father was the kind of guy that would get out of the car and chase you down the street with a lead pipe.
As his son, or you talked about his enemies?
Um, could be anybody. Just you piss him off. He didn't even care if it was a cop.
So he quick to get angry and just show it and get violent.
Very much so. He was like ready to attack at a moment's notice. He was like always prepared for violence. His whole life was about violence. I never saw the guy relaxed.
And I assume his upbringing was similar to what he put you through. Yes?
Well, he came from Greece, from a family of 14 children, and 7 of them died as infants. So it was very poor after the war, World War II, and I imagine they suffered a lot. Um, I can't even begin to understand, but from the stories that I heard, my grandfather was no saint. He was also a very violent man, so I don't know if it's learned behavior, hereditary, or a combination of the two, but I'm trying to break the chain.
Well, you're doing a good job so far.
I don't know about that. My wife and kids might differ with you on that.
Well, let me ask you a question. Do you have a violent streak?
Very.
Oh, you do.
Yeah.
Even at this point in time, now through therapy and everything else, yes?
It's constant work. Constant work. I'm expecting danger to come around the corner any second, and I have to react to it.
So it's
It's
kind of
like
like an anticipation of someone coming to get you, doing you harm, this kind of thing, or your family.
um yeah, I think it's like an innate paranoia.
Very skeptical of everybody,
Very much so.
myself included. Probably when you got in contact, you said, "Who's this guy? Who's he thinking?
No, not at all.
Why does he want to know
I
my?"
have great antennas. I can spot the enemy from far away.
Now that's a very good point. You develop these wonderful instincts, and you knew that I was a nice guy, which I have to say that I am. If nothing else, I'm a decent guy. But I will tell you that that is something that an inner city kid develops to the utmost.
Very much.
And you're still honing those skills even now. You probably can weed out the bad apples and also the good ones, I'm sure.
Well, I
Now,
do a lot of business in not the nicest areas. Um, that's a nicer way of saying ghettos. Um, so I'm constantly on alert because something's always going on. I mean, there's yellow tape um at least once a month for some gang member that got shot or something, and I have to go around it. It's just like I never left Newark.
it's a violent society. The gangs are prevalent. Every city suffers, some more so than others, but every city suffers, and the suburbs too, not just the cities.
Yeah, it affects everyone, but some people are able to avoid most of it and not really have to deal with the hunger or the homelessness or the violence that I see every day. I try to put on a smile every day. but sometimes it's really hard.
Now, going back again, this is an inner city kid going to the suburbs and trying to fit in like a round peg in a square hole, I would assume. And once you're there, what's life like?
Well, as soon as we moved there, everybody would stare at us. Did you ever see My Big Fat Greek Wedding when they're having the barbecue in the front yard and the neighbors are walking by staring at them?
Yes.
Yeah, we always got stared at. Not that we had barbecues on the front yard. We had them in the backyard, but it was a corner lot, so our backyard might as well have been a front yard. Everybody could see. So we would have these large barbecues with all these immigrants over from both of my parents' sides of the family, and people would just walk by staring at us like we were aliens.
Is it just because of your appearance, or how did they scope you out so quickly?
Well, we were the first immigrants that I could think of, and everybody else in the area was like from the Andy Griffith show, Mayberry Street,
Oh my God.
It
Okay.
just seemed like that to me. And they heard us speaking different languages and playing different kinds of music. And they were extremely conservative and we were loud. And, it was like being on the other side of the cage in a zoo. When you go to look at the monkeys, you felt like the monkeys,
Hmm.
and for my parents, they couldn't have cared less. But for me as a kid trying to fit in, it was horrible.
So your parents are being themselves. You're trying desperately to fit in at school as well as home, as around the neighborhood also. And the music is playing, and these people don't know what to make of it. And then they finally realize that they have outsiders in their white bread neighborhood, I assume.
Yeah, and my mom's family was Spanish, so we had a combination of Greek and Spanish, which made it even crazier.
Wow. As some combo.
Yeah. And we had dogs and cats and music and cousins and aunts and uncles, and it was every weekend in the summertime was like, I don't know, 50, 60 people. And these were extremely conservative people that didn't even really come out in their yard,
Hmm.
you know? And here, this big noisy family. And another thing that got me in a lot of trouble was my dad was never home, so he would try to make up for it, I guess. Maybe some people say it would be buying your love, but for Christmas I would get like a lot of presents, and the other kids in the neighborhood would get like one present each, and it would be a very simple present. I had new bicycles and mini bikes and mopeds and skateboards and I don't know, so many things in the yard that the kids wanted to kill me.
Yeah.
They
Isn't that
they
something?
they hated me, envied me. Um, the more my father gave me, the more they wanted to kill me.
I'm laughing, but I'm also picturing exactly how that might have been. And it sounds like a happy family because your father, although he's buying your love, it sounds like he's showering you with gifts, so on and so forth. How many kids in the family?
There were four of us.
And I say it appeared to be a happy family, but obviously it wasn't.
No, it was very dark inside that house. It was all nice when the relatives were all over. It was all a show, though. Inside, it was a house of horror.
Dad puts on a show, many do. They're very good at appearing to be the greatest, all-American dad. But when the doors are closed, the tables are turned, and that's exactly what happened to you many, many years ago. And and then you grow now. How many years spent in this home?
Let's say from 5 to 18, so maybe 13 years.
Wow, okay. So you grew up in this home, so to speak. Tell me, as the years progress, what else sticks in your mind?
Every time I have a nightmare, I'm inside that house again. And I have nightmares all the time. And I've never left that house. I'm still trapped in there. I've never had a dream or a nightmare in the house that I live in Bloomfield. I'm still stuck there after all these years.
It's post-traumatic stress,
Yep.
classic, and that's just the way the brain works. And I hate to say this, but you may battle this forever. You get control, and then what's interesting when you say about sleep, dreams and sleeping. That's when all the subconscious goes haywire, and you all these things are drummed up again. They're forever with you. Boy, but now as you grew into adulthood, so to speak, you were there until 18. How was the vibe in the neighborhood as you became a teenager?
Good question. What ended up happening was after years of abuse inside the house and getting beat up by the older kids in the neighborhood because they envied me, and then going to school and getting beat up again because we were immigrants, I had two choices. One was to cower in a corner and just hide the rest of my life, and the other one was to become meaner than the monster. So as I got older, I left all my nice friends from school, um, that were goody goodies, mostly Jewish kids that I ended up finding a home with, because they stayed away from everybody else too. They kind of had their own thing, and they accepted me in. My first two girlfriends were both Jewish. I felt some safety in that community. But as I got older, that wasn't the right group to protect me because they got picked on too. So what I had to do was I had to team up with some really bad kids. And when I teamed up with those really bad kids, I turned the tables on the neighborhood and we started beating up the kids in the neighborhood, and that's how I got my revenge.
First you're beaten up, then you turn the tables, as you say, and now you're the tough guy.
Yeah, I was the terror of the neighborhood. When the neighbors saw me walking down the street, they all went inside their houses.
Wow. Is that you and your gang, or you by yourself?
Um, well, obviously I couldn't have done it by myself. I had a lot of really mean, scary looking kids that were a lot bigger than I was because I was always small for my age. But just the kind of devious kid that I became, um, to lash out for all the years of them allowing their older sons to pick on me. Um, they were on guard all the time. They didn't know what I was gonna do to their house or their kid or whatever next because I was really, really angry.
Now you say retaliation against them. I say partly retaliation against your father, what he did to you also. That played a part, no?
Uh, yeah, I'm sure it was a combination of everything. I mean, I couldn't take my anger out on my dad, so I'm gonna take it out on somebody, right?
That's right. And did the cops know your name?
Oh my God. They never left me alone. Um, they were watching me all the time. I was always in trouble in school with the cops. One time I had this really nutty vice principal that used to hide in the bushes and try to catch us smoking weed and cigarettes, and he would film it and then call our parents to the school Kind of like in that movie, what was that famous movie with the high school kid that uh cuts school and goes to New York and yeah,
Ferris Bueller.
yeah, he was a lot like that guy.
Yeah.
Very odd. His whole life was about catching kids doing something.
Uh,
So one time he was hiding in the bushes and he was filming us. I guess we were smoking weed and he jumped out and he said, "I got you." And we all ran. And I ran to the bathroom and in the school and I flushed it down the toilet. So he called all of our parents into the office and we're all sitting there in the office and he's got this big grin on his face and he's in his swivel chair and he's got the devious little black mustache and those Coke bottle glasses
uh,
and he had the greasy black hair and he was like, "Welcome everyone." And our parents are just like all staring at him and he goes, "I have some important news for you." And my father walks in, still wearing his white apron from the diner, covered in blood
mm,
from butchering all the meat and stuff.
yeah.
And he's got a big knife in his hand.
Oh boy.
He didn't even leave the knife behind. He walked into the office with a, it was like a horror movie. He walks into the office with a big knife in his hand, an apron covered in blood, and he walks right up to the guy who almost fell off of his chair and goes to him, "Why you bother me when I'm working?" And the guy goes, "Calm down, Mr. Dessipris. Please let me explain." Now, two of the other kids that were sitting there with me, one of them had a father that was a police officer.
Mhm.
So he was sitting down watching this, and I could see the guy's mouth where his jaw was like wide open. He was like, "What's happening here?" But at the same time, he wasn't there to be a police officer. He was there to defend his son. So they're just sitting there watching this play out. And the guy goes, "Mr. Dessipris, I caught your son and his friends with a marijuana cigarette." And my father goes, "I'm no care if it's Camel, Kent, Marlboro. I don't care what kind cigarette. You don't bother me when I'm working. You understand?" And the guy was like, "No, no, marijuana, not Marlboro." And my father just said, "If you bother me again, I'm going to kill you." And
See, he took it as it was bothering, taking him out of his workplace.
yes,
Not he took it away from you completely. Nothing to do with you.
exactly. I
About
didn't exist.
right.
He was bothering him. His life revolved around his business. So he was being bothered by this guy, and that was annoying to him. The parents all got, the guy was so scared, he didn't know what to say. I guess back then you could get away with this kind of stuff. You
Yeah.
couldn't now, obviously, but all the parents just got up and snuck out the door with their children, including the cop. And as my father was walking out the door, he said to me, "Me and you, we gonna talk later, mister."
Oh boy.
And then he just left. And then I just walked out, and the guy was afraid to ever call my father again.
Yeah, I guess so. I can imagine him walking up with that bloody knife or and with the apron, don't bother even taking the work clothes. I mean the apron, actually. The bloody apron. That's a sight in of itself.
Not even in the movies.
And you do a great Greek accent. I'm sure you speak Greek. I do my
I
Italiano,
can get by.
but I do my Italiano, but you do your Greek. And
Yeah.
the Greek thing is very close to the Italian thing. I've known Italian fathers very similar to your father from the old country.
Nuts, right?
They don't take any nonsense. They don't take anything. Again, they say, "You've taken me away from my work." And
Right.
that's how your father saw it. And that's very interesting how selfish, let's put it frankly, a man could be, because he didn't think of your plight, he thought of his own.
Yeah, he didn't even know what the word marijuana meant. He
He
thought he
didn't
was saying Marlboro cigarettes.
He didn't
Luckily for me.
have a brand, maybe a brand of cig, right? He didn't get that you were smoking a drug, I guess you could say. Wow.
Yeah, my father didn't know the difference between marijuana and heroin. It was just all, he called everything dope.
My father did too. He would say, don't ever do that dope.
Right.
Otherwise, you're going to have to deal with me.
Exactly.
Everything was dope from heroin to the, very innocuous pot, which was probably not anywhere near what you find today. Because they're supposed
No, it was like it was harmless compared to what you find today with all the chemicals in it.
and I don't smoke, but I've heard that the strain that they have today, or the strains they have today, is a far cry from that very tame stuff they had back then. But nevertheless, so then Dad, did he give you a beating?
Um, I don't remember.
Okay.
I remember my father never really beat me. He just terrified me. My mother was the one that beat me.
See, that's something you mentioned, that you touched on that the last time. So your father was the disciplinarian in a way where you were afraid of him just because of his voice, because of his mannerisms, because the threat that he posed. But your mother did the dirty work, right?
Yeah, she's the one that basically whipped me on a daily basis for just
Right.
existing.
I hate, you have to be a real, and this is your mother. I have to watch my P's and Q's. No offense. You have to be a real sadist to do that, to take advantage of your kid and get him at his most vulnerable, and do that to him and terrorize him. It's just terrible. It's a terrible way to grow up, I'm sure. My mother and father never touched me, but I knew no, that's not true. My mother in the moment, Nick, would give me the little slap across the face here and there. And in the moment, I pick something up I shouldn't pick up. Hey, that kind of thing. Never a planned thing terrorizing me and anything like that. So
We
do you,
had broken windows all over the house from me ducking from her shoes.
so she threw things.
Ooh, she would hit me with the belt if she couldn't catch me. She would throw shoes at me, and I got pretty good at ducking. So my father would have to come home and fix broken windows all the time after work. He'd be pretty pissed off about that.
See, now you growing, getting bigger. I know you were considerably small, but getting bigger. I'm thinking you were bigger than your mother at one point, right? But you would never retaliate, would you? Physically?
No, that was not something you did back in those times. You would never raise a hand to your parents. You weren't, we never even said a four-letter word in my house.
No.
Ever, ever. One
You,
time one of my siblings learned the F word and she didn't really know what it meant, but she repeated it. And my father almost beat her to death.
hmm.
It was
Your father did get physical
with
also, but your
yeah,
mother
but
was
never, the
the
odd thing was never really with me.
okay. Right.
With me it was just a form of terror and threats.
Now, why do you think that was? Why do you think he never laid a hand on you?
I'm not sure.
Hmm.
It's a good question.
But you saw him do it to your brother's sister?
No, it was I only saw him I only saw him beat that female sibling. I don't know why. Um, with me, it was just always threatening. Maybe he felt bad because he was beaten as a boy by his father, and he was trying to hold back. I really I have no idea. I never got the chance to ask him why he would beat my sister and not me.
And these threats, and of course the physicality that your mother showed against you, did this harden you and make you worse and make you more angry? It never
Oh,
taught
of
you a
course.
lesson. It didn't never taught you a lesson, I'm sure.
No, absolutely not. For many years, it taught me to hate women.
Hmm.
I had a lot of issues with that. Um, I would I would treat women really badly, and I guess I was trying to get even with my mother. And as I got older, I felt really bad about that. And any of the ex girlfriends or women that I knew in the past that I came across, if I had the chance, I would apologize to them because
Did you
I didn't know what was happening. I was just a kid.
still seek your mother's acceptance?
Uh, that'll never happen.
I mean, back then, did you say
Oh,
maybe if I can make her happy, she won't hit me anymore?
once I got older, I started doing everything for her, buying her everything, taking her on lavish vacations to Europe, um, helping pay her rent, whatever. And the more I did, the more I realized that I was just spinning my wheels. I just it was never I was never gonna get the love that I wanted. Yeah, she would accept all those things from me, but that didn't really mean that she loved me. As a matter of fact, the more I gave her, the more she started demanding.
That's human nature right there. You know,
Yeah.
you think you're winning somebody over, maybe, but no. Then
Did you
they
did
they
you ever did you ever hear about the movie Mommy Dearest
oh,
about Joan Crawford?
of course.
My mother was Mommy Dearest.
Wow.
Everything in the house had to be perfect, otherwise it freaked her out. Everything had to be spotless. We had to be dressed um in iron clothes even to sit at the dinner table. We had to sit a certain way where we wouldn't wrinkle our clothes. We weren't allowed to sit in the living room. It was only for important guests. It was all covered with plastic, the furniture. Never got to sit in that room through my whole childhood.
Well, the Italians are famous for that. The first floor of the house is plastic covered furniture. Nobody goes up there. They live it. They eat. They do everything in the basement.
Right.
They sleep upstairs.
Well, our basement wasn't fixed up and it
Okay.
never got fixed up. So the only room that was covered in plastic was that um it wasn't yeah, it was the living room. We were the dining room we had guests in, but it wasn't covered in plastic. The just the living room was covered in plastic, and it made me so angry that I couldn't sit in a room in my own house that when my father invited important businessmen over to try to get money out of them to invest in his diner, I would set up all these kinds of pranks in the room. I would put a whoopee cushion under the couch, uh, a lighter for the cigars that electrocuted them,
Oh boy.
all kinds of pranks, and it would really embarrass my father, and he would want to kill me, but that was the only way I could get even.
I was going to say this is right out of a movie, and it actually is because you wouldn't believe that. As far as I could just picture that as they sat down with that noise.
Yeah, you had this huge Greek guy that was probably like, I don't know, 300 pounds.
Yeah.
The guy owned a shipping company, extremely wealthy, big cigar, and he sits down on the couch and the whoopee cushion goes off and he looks at my father like, "What the hell is this?" And my father's like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. It's my son. He's toy." And I'm running out of the room. I was watching from far away, running out of the room and hiding in a closet somewhere in the house. But that was the only way I was able to get even.
And you risked everything because you knew you were going to get screwed after that. But it was well worth it, I guess, for the moment's pleasure. Oh man. And the psyche behind all that is very fascinating to me because what you'll do to retaliate, to get even, and even if it means paying the price later on, that's incredible because the resentment was so strong, I would assume.
I guess it's a cry for help, really, is what it is. It's like you're not giving me any attention. You're ignoring me. I'm here, you know?
It's a cry for attention, a cry to be noticed. Yeah, it is. Well, you know, bad or good, just notice me.
Exactly. Just stay there in the corner, smile when people come over, don't speak. You know, it's like, no, I don't think so.
Well, you know, the old adage, kids are better seen and not heard, they used to say. Everything has turned around completely. The kids rule the roost now.
Exactly.
Parents say, "What do you need now, honey?" And what now? And what they revolve their lives around the kids now. It's so different.
I know that's where my struggle comes in now because my kids see how it is with their friends and I don't work that way. I'm still living in the old world.
So you wield an iron hand at home?
Um, Not to the extent that my father did, but I'm not going to spoil my kids. Like today, my son spent this whole day raking leaves with me, you know, while maybe somebody else, their kids are playing video games while they go to an affluent school in an affluent area, not Bloomfield, outside of Bloomfield. I don't want to mention the town. And you have a lot of rich, spoiled kids. And I have to make sure that my children understand that we're different. We're not like that. They're gonna have to earn their way through life just like I did. Not to the extent where I'm stealing to get money to eat. They don't have to do that. But, I want them to be responsible and not to think that they're going to get anything on a silver platter.
Well, raking the leaves today did them more good than playing video games, I'm sure. Or the one son, your son?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, at the same time, he has his freedom. He has his one of those electric bikes, and he rides all around free like I did on my moped as a kid. But at the same time, when he's home, if I need help with something, he's got to do it.
So when you turn 18 in this town, what's your life like at that point? Are you at odds with the cops all the time? You're doing illegal things. You're running with uh, gangs in the neighborhood. What are you doing?
Well, it wasn't the type of
There's no
area where,
there's
where
no
there were
gangs in
gangs.
that area. My fault. Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't it was, goody goody area, but um I was conducting my own uh illegal little businesses out of the house. At 14, my mom left, so I had 4 years there to run some illegal businesses out of the house to make money to survive because my father didn't pay the utilities. So the water and electricity were turned off because he used all the money for gambling. There was no food in the refrigerator. So I had to do something. So at first I made this contact in Chinatown and I was bringing over a carload of fireworks and I was selling illegal fireworks to the kids in the high school. And then after that, um, I graduated to selling weed. And unfortunately, I was doing that out of my house. My father was never home. He worked 16 hours a day, so the guy had no clue that his son was dealing out of the house. My customers were the high school seniors that were all jocks, and there was the jocks in high school, and there were the freaks. The freaks were the ones that listened to rock and roll and smoked weed. And the jocks were these football players that were all pumped up, lifted weights, and only drank beer and never touched weed. But the secret was that they actually smoked weed, but they didn't want anyone to know. And I was their connection. And if I ever told anyone that I was selling them weed, they would kill me.
Interesting.
Yeah, so here you have this 14-year-old selling weed secretly out of his house to the high school football jocks. And yeah, nobody ever found out about it.
We used to call them it was the burnouts and the jocks.
Okay. Burnouts. There you go.
Yeah, burnouts in 1978. I graduated before you, I think, a little bit, a couple years. But and we used to call it that. And I was, I was a jock. I never touched a drug. Not because I'm a goody goody, it just never appealed to me. It still doesn't to this day.
Good for you.
I don't alter my consciousness. I'm afraid more than anything else. But did you ever delve into drugs at that point besides weed? Any hard stuff?
No, I think I did the weed because I wanted to escape the terrible place where I was. And when I was 11 years old, there used to be these older kids that would go behind the elementary school and smoke weed. And I just hung around them, and I guess I wanted to fit in because I didn't really have any friends. And at the age of 11 years old, they started giving me weed. And from there on, I did it up until the age of 18 when I quit.
It's very young.
Yeah.
These days you see these kids smoking at a young age. It's almost normal now, which is never going to be normal in my mind. But
No.
In those days in the 70s, or am I talking the 80s now? I guess
the early 70s.
Early 70s, when you were 11 years old,
Yeah.
a kid. I mean, when I can't imagine, but I could imagine, but I can't put myself in that place because I remember my mindset at 11. All I cared about was maybe baseball. Maybe I was starting to like girls, but I didn't want to admit it. Very innocent in a place that was a lot tougher than where you were, because you were in the center of, Whitelandia, and I was more in a more of a, what they call now, a hood. But
Believe it or not, Ralph, believe
yeah,
it or not, those wealthy white suburb areas is where everybody was smoking weed.
a lot of weed. Yeah, a lot of
Yeah.
pop.
The parents, the teachers.
The
I
teachers.
used to light joints for the police officers that parked in their car behind the school. They would ask me for a lighter if I had a joint.
This is as a young kid.
Yeah, they were. I mean, they were leftovers from the 60s. They thought it was like smoking a cigarette.
Right.
In these white areas, it wasn't a big deal to smoke marijuana. My parents didn't know what it was because they were immigrants. But half of the adults that I knew were smoking marijuana.
But you doing the other things, dealing from the house, getting into some nefarious businesses there just to make money, because you told me your main concern was to make money. That was on your mind all the time.
To survive.
Is it because you had, now your father, because he gambled, he had nothing left over, and so you felt responsible, or maybe you just wanted a roof over your head.
I didn't want to have to beg my friends for $1 to buy a sandwich. I had too much pride. I mean, I could do it once in a while, but how many times are you going to do that? You know what I mean?
Right.
I came up with this ingenious idea to walk a mile up the hill to this fancy golf course in West Orange. It used to be called Rock Spring Golf Course, I think. I don't know if it's still there, but there was all these wealthy people parked their cars there. And I would break into them and take the cassette players and the 8-track players. And I filled up my locker in high school when I was 14 years old, and I tried to sell them to the seniors. And they were like, why would I give this little punk money when we could just break into his locker, which they did. And they ended up taking them all. So that business really never got off the ground.
Did you get a good education in this school in the meantime, or no?
I went from a kid that was what we called in junior high weighted classes. It was the classes for the smartest kids. That's when I was friends with all the Jewish kids. I went from being one of the smartest kids, and then when everything started going wrong in my house and things just got worse and worse and spiraled out of control, and then my mother left and my parents split up and my father stopped bringing food home and stopped paying the utilities. The last thing I found, important at the time were my grades. I had to survive, so school went down the hill. I stopped showing up half of the time because I was too embarrassed because I didn't have any money for the cafeteria. Um, yeah, I was just out there on the streets trying to find ways to survive. I remember in junior high standing in line at the cafeteria and borrowing a quarter so I could get a little cookie. And then as I was online, I would knock other things off of the shelf, like I don't know. What were some of those things we had back then? Doodles,
All those Hostess cakes and
yeah,
all that.
yeah, all that stuff. I would knock it down on the ground and kick it down towards the cashier with my feet, and I would just pay for the cookie, and then I would kick the other stuff to a table, and I'd have something to eat that day.
That's really sad.
Yeah,
That's terrible.
yeah.
But fast now, you graduated, yes?
I did not.
You did not graduate.
At the age of 16, I had to go to work full time.
Ah, where was that now? Full-time work.
It was at a restaurant that was owned by I won't say the name, but by a notorious mafia family, Italian, and they had bookies and drugs and all kinds of stuff being sold and done inside the restaurant while we were working. I was just a kid, and on the third day, I got my hand stuck in a cheese grater and lost 2 fingers.
Oh boy.
Yeah, luckily they were able to sew them back.
Uh, thank goodness.
Yeah, so after that I had many odd jobs to survive my whole life. I don't even remember half of them, but we weren't there much longer because at 18 my father lost the house and business to gambling. So we moved into a roach infested apartment in Elizabeth, a 1 bedroom. My father slept on the bed, I slept on the floor. You remember those popcorn ceilings?
Oh,
Popcorn ceilings?
I know what you mean.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, I would be afraid to fall asleep at night because when I was looking up at the ceiling, the cockroaches would try to make it across the ceiling and they would lose their footing because of the it was uneven because of the popcorn ceilings. And I was afraid they were going to fall in my mouth while I was trying to sleep.
Uh,
So I slept with one eye open.
oh boy. Wow.
Yeah, so after a while, I started walking around in the streets of Elizabeth and I met some other juvenile delinquents that I could hang out with so I wouldn't be all alone. And we were trying to get beers at a liquor store one time, asking adults to buy beer for us. And nobody would. So we're sitting there on the curb, me and this Cuban kid that I had met. And this big Irish guy with a huge mustache, like from one of those quartets back in the day,
Yeah.
comes up to me and goes, "Hey guys, you trying to score some beers?" And I was like, "Yes, sir." And I go, "Here's our change." And he goes, "No, no, 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 you keep it. I'll buy it for you." So, looking back on it now, the first thing you would have thought these days is this guy a child molester?
Right.
Because he was like in his 30s and I was like 18 years old, you know? But he sat down with us. He drank the beers with us on the curb, which was really odd for a 35-year-old guy to be drinking beers there with two 18-year-old kids.
Yeah.
And he offered us a job. So the very next day at 9 a.m., I was taught by a professional con artist how to pull my first scam.
Hmm.
And I did that for many many years after. I don't want to give you too much information on that because I might put that in the film, but
No, I don't blame you, but
it,
that's interesting that the guy took you under his wing, kind of, and taught you the ropes.
yeah, within 6 months, I was driving a Mark V Lincoln Continental, shiny green with a beige moonroof, and blowing $500 every weekend in Atlantic City, spoiling my friends. I needed a pillow to sit on just to look over the dashboard.
And he was making money off of you, I'm sure.
Exactly. It turned out that I excelled as a student.
Right, right, right. Well, you're a bright guy. He probably spotted that, and he said, yeah, I know he didn't do it out of the kindness of his heart completely, maybe a little bit, but who knows? And you're
Who
right
knows?
about the 35 and the 18. This guy's got to be up to no good, sexually. But we didn't. I hate to say it, we didn't think that way back then.
We didn't. And he wasn't like that at all, thank God.
Oh, I'm sure. But it never even crossed. For instance, I used to hang out with a priest, two priests. They really, talk about the child molesters of renowned sources here. But that was, nothing. My mother never thought in a million years that this priest had anything up his sleeve. And he bought me things. He
Oh
took
my
me
God.
places. And this is Father Mark, who passed away. Great, great guy. I was an altar boy.
Thank God.
You can believe that. Yeah, right. Because, I mean, if you look at the statistics and what these creeps did to these kids in the Catholic Church, I got lucky.
Yeah, the Boy Scouts and the Catholic Church.
That's right. That's right. The Boy Scouts also. And they revamped the Boy Scouts, by the way, completely because of all that action going, all that terrible stuff going on. But nevertheless, so now you're a full-blown con artist or whatever you want to call yourself. Where do we go from there?
Well, things got really crazy at that point because I had people threatening my life on a daily basis when they found out that they were scammed. So I had to lay low a lot, and I had to be really careful, and maybe that's where some of the paranoia developed. Because there were always people that were that wanted revenge. Also, another thing that came of that is I started to meet a lot of women that were much older than me.
Hmm.
And for some very odd reason that I still can't explain, they wanted to have a relationship with me, sexual relations with me.
Hmm.
And I started to become very advanced for my age. And I started to date women that were like 10 years older than me, that were like divorced with children. I was probably closer to being an age closer to their children than to be their, but it just kept happening over and over. And I learned a lot from it. I learned a lot from it.
You in your late teens at this point?
Yeah, it was like 18, 19. They would be like 28, 29, 33.
That was an older woman. Like you would not, now it's like a kid. When I think of 33, you can only wish to go back, but that was an older woman back
Much older.
then.
You would
Yes.
never, you would never even dream. But because of the business I got involved in, um, I guess they saw me as different because I wasn't like this innocent little kid. I was a scam artist driving around in a Mark V Lincoln Continental. I had more than they did.
Right. And that had to be attractive to them in a strange way. Or at least you were on their level or caliber or whatever they saw. Hey, these older women, they like the young guys anyway, and you were prime material, I guess.
Maybe they thought that because back then, things were different. It's a lot more common now, but divorced women back then with kids, nobody would want them.
That's true.
So a
That's
guy like me that was just so happy to be with an older woman, you know,
it's very interesting. So now you go ahead a little bit, and did you have you went forward in engaging in the same type of thing into your 20s?
uh, on and off, I would try to go straight for a while. And then if it didn't work out, I'd go back to scams. And then I would get a job in a construction company or something and for 2, 3 years. And then I'd go back to scams. And meanwhile, through this whole process, I was never able to have a real relationship with a woman. I was just bouncing around all over the place.
Hmm.
And it was exhausting. I pretended I was having fun, but I was miserable.
Did you want somebody steady, somebody serious, somebody to love?
Yeah, of course. But I had no clue how to have a real relationship. And if any of them mentioned anything that was even remotely sounded like marriage, I was out of there.
Mm.
I
Yeah,
would run
that
like a thief.
that scared you.
Woo! Because that would be back like in my parents' house. That's what marriage was.
I see.
Beating each other up, violence.
I get it.
Yeah, I would run like a thief.
Yeah, this is your idea of marriage because that's all you experienced. And so, you figure, why would I want to go back to that? I've lived through that. I survived that. You think I'm going to go back to that? No. So when was your epiphany, if you have one?
My epiphany was a nervous breakdown at the age of, I think I was 34 years old when I had a total nervous breakdown.
They used to call it that. They don't call it that anymore either.
Yeah, they don't call it that anymore either, but that's what it was. I literally couldn't function. I couldn't boil an egg. I couldn't tie my shoes. It was like a computer that just went nuts. Nothing worked. So that was a point where I started the first thing that people do, I guess my age, is they go look at those self-help books.
Right.
I went to look at self-help books. And because I didn't understand what was happening. I didn't grow up in a generation where we talked about therapy and psychology and these things. I didn't know what that was, counseling. You know, I thought that was like all a big joke.
Now, this break that you had, was that something that seemed to occur overnight?
No,
I know it was coming on with all of these things piling up, but did you realize it, or all at once, or was it a gradual?
it was, looking back now, it was getting worse every year. By that time, I had already been successful in business. I had a good amount of savings. I had been partners in a couple businesses, food businesses. Um, I had been doing pretty well, and then I went out to Florida to get involved with my aunt and uncle to open up a diner. And you know how they say you shouldn't mix family with business? It's
Yeah,
true.
yeah.
So that was a disaster, and I came back broke, in debt, in my credit cards, and I just couldn't tough it out anymore. My therapist says that it's possible that I did all that stuff on purpose. because I wanted to understand my father better and be able to connect with him. So I repeated all his mistakes, went into business, lost everything so that I could feel closer to him. I don't know if that's true, but it's an interesting theory.
Did you spend time in a psychiatric ward?
No, I just toughed it out like I always do. But
Were you handed medication?
I I never trusted medication at the time, so I didn't want to. I just basically toughed it out in a room that I rented from these two old Italian sisters in Verona that lived on the first floor, and I rented a room on the second floor with a shared bathroom in the hallway. The room was so small when I had to be careful when I opened up the door so I wouldn't break the window on the other side of the room.
Jesus Christ.
So I survived on a slice of pizza and water from the sink until I was able to get back on my feet. But I did something even crazier. I received this letter in the mail from some girl I had met when I was on vacation in Cancun years before that. And she said, if you're not married, give me a call. It's been a long time. So I gave her a call and she told me that she was a vice president of a bank. She owned a condo. She was doing really well. I told her that I was going through a difficult time. She told me, why don't you come down to Mexico and, take some time off and see if you could feel better. And I was like, I'm all tapped out. And I owe money like $10,000 on my credit card, which back then was probably like 50,000 now. And she said, don't worry about it. I'll pay for everything. So I said, frigate. I jumped on an airplane and went to Cancun, Mexico, in the middle of all this craziness where I had a nervous breakdown, no money, no job, living in a room. I figured, how could it get any worse?
Uh-huh.
So while I was down there, she promised that we would just be friends because I told her that I can't deal with a relationship right now. That lasted about 3 hours.
I was going to say.
Yeah. Because I just didn't know how to be with a woman as a friend.
Right.
And I think she was very lonely and she was pretending she just wanted to be friends. So anyway, jumping ahead, she's the one that convinced me to go to therapy. She said she had done it when she hit rock bottom earlier in her life and that it had helped her a lot. And at first I didn't want to listen to her, but I finally gave in. But the problem is I didn't have any money for a therapist. So I was in Barnes and Noble and I'm looking at this self-help book. And in the back of the self-help book, it had this name of a Christian counseling center in New York City that will help people that don't have the money to pay for therapy. So I thought it was a sign from God. So I called them, I went there, and I'm still seeing the therapist 25 years later.
Wow, isn't that something? Wow, the same person. He must have done right by you.
Oh, he totally turned around my life. I went from being alone in a room to having a home, a wife, children, a successful business. It wasn't overnight. I was terrified of commitment. I was terrified of abandonment. But yeah, he got me to where I am.
Is it still a struggle every day? Is it a day-to-day thing, or do you feel you've conquered a great deal? Or
I
maybe
conquered a
maybe
great deal, but it's still day to day.
yeah.
It's still day to day for life.
Do you have um classic flashbacks of all this trauma?
Only when I'm sleeping.
At night it comes out, like Freud said.
Yeah, my wife says that like at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, I'll wake her up because I'm screaming and crying and kicking and punching, but I don't remember any of it.
How's your wife handling everything?
You'd have to talk to her about that. I think it's a constant struggle.
How many years married?
21.
Oh, excellent. Excellent. Cindy and I are just over two. We're newlyweds, I guess.
Oh, wow.
In compare, yeah, I waited until I was 62 to get married.
Get out of here.
I did. What was that, huh? And also she waited. She points out that she waited. She's 50 though. So, she's a spring chicken. But yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I'm 9 years older than my wife. I feel that to be on the same level, a man has to be like 10 years older than the woman because the woman is more mature.
You think
So,
so?
yeah, in my opinion, I think like a 30-year-old woman is like a 40-year-old man.
You may be right in many ways. Yeah, you may be right. I admit that, babe. Yeah, you may be right. And yet, what's funny about marriage? I said to myself, I'll never get married. I resigned myself to the fact that I was not getting married, Nick. And then Cindy saw my picture on Facebook and listened to my radio program and came from Maine to come see me. And that's how it started.
No way.
I have a story and a half. You have no idea.
Wow.
One day you'll interview me and
Yeah.
we'll turn the next. That's actually a good one. The next video we'll get. What's that thing? She says because she went through similar things, a little bit different, but very terrible, terrible things.
Yeah.
I'm the reason why it turned out in a positive sense. So you had your therapist, and Cindy had her future husband, who now is her current husband. Yeah, I ran around like a nut for many, many years. And now, I'm settled down in Paterson, New Jersey, of all places. Can you believe that? But nevertheless, that's what we're going to do. We're going to have you interview me. Maybe if I get Cindy, you can interview both of us. But it'll be very interesting. We'll have a therapy session together. But
Yeah, it must be that calm and kind voice of yours that lured your wife in. I don't know.
here's what happened. In a nutshell, not to take up too much time because we're on the air for an hour and a half here. I like these long-term interviews because this is what the future, this is what it is now, actually. The podcasts are 3 hours sometimes, 3.5 hours.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, for instance, there's a guy, Joe Rogan, who has, multi-million subscribers, ridiculous. He has somebody on for 3.5 hours.
No way. I know he
4
has
hours.
the biggest podcast in the world.
4 hours, 6 hours.
Get out of here.
Yeah.
Wow.
It used to be, you get them off as fast as you get them on, but no.
Yeah, my friends have all been telling me, I've been asking them, did you guys see the YouTube interview that I did? And they go, well, I watched the first 5 minutes, but when I realized it was 45 minutes, I said, I don't have time for this.
That's probably now what was the age bracket there?
Exactly. These guys are all my age. They're like 60 years old.
Because when I say, yeah, I'm on radio, a young guy will say, what? Radio? What's that? They have no idea what that is. If I say, well, I'm also on YouTube and we go for a longer period of time, we tackle different things, they're ready for that. I don't know. Generation thing. What can I tell you? But so then things have gone swimmingly. I'm sure it's a battle. Life is tough for everybody from time to time. But have you reached a place of serenity?
Not yet, but I'm hoping that this film helps me in a cathartic way. I've been holding all this in for so many years and only talking about it with my therapist. So maybe it's time I let it all out and see if I can finally come to some kind of peaceful resolution,
Do you feel good about telling your story?
I used to be an extremely secretive person. And if somebody asked me my personal business, I felt threatened. and now I can't shut up. Every
I was under the impression that I don't want to bring her in again, but I wonder if I should. That your wife wants you to lay low, just calm down a little bit and not talk about it so much. But maybe I'm wrong on that. Is she in on it? I mean, not in on it, but is she agreeable to it?
My wife thinks that repeating stuff from the past is a waste of time, that you should just move on with your life. And I explained to her it's not that easy when you have PTSD, but she doesn't get it.
Yeah.
She just can't relate.
She didn't have the trauma you had either, probably. I'm not sure.
Well, she's had hers, but not, she comes from her parents are still together. They're in their 80s. She didn't go through what I went through. We
Yeah.
all have our issues that we went through, and we all have I don't think anybody has a perfect childhood, but and I'm sure that there's people that had worse childhoods than I did.
It's true. There's always somebody worse.
I can
Hard to believe, but there's always somebody worse.
I could just go by my own experience,
You feel like you peel another layer off every time, like the talk we just had for the last hour and a half, you feel, unburdened.
Sometimes I feel like I take a step forward and 2 steps back.
Mm.
And then sometimes I feel like I take 2 steps forward and 1 step back. It just depends. It's never any kind of exact science,
Well, those with an attention span that, not that great, realize that we've talked here for an hour and 30, and it was worth every minute. So, when you have some time to listen to this baby, I don't know why I'm saying it now at the end of the video, but you should, because this is, what it's all about. This is two people being honest. I've let some secrets be known, like the priest never molested me. That's a feat to have a priest be with a handsome young man and not lay hands on him. That's a feat. Now, he was a very good guy, Father Mark. But what I'm saying is you can't do this thing in 20 minutes, right? Or you're frozen. My friend is, I was wondering why I was getting no response. He's frozen in time. All right. And we're out. Okay, listen, thank you for being with us. That's one way to end an interview. Involuntarily, I should say. All right. Take care of yourself. See you next time. Subscribe to the channel. If you've been with us for that hour and a half that I talked about, subscribe to the channel. Have a good evening.